This podcast is brought to you by Infinite Resources, a local staffing agency connecting diverse job candidates in central Iowa companies.
Amplified.
So your job, state auditor, Rob Sand.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me. And I mean, a lot of people, they just kind of see what's on the news, right? What makes to the news. But can you quickly tell somebody like me, what's the state auditor do, and maybe some significant audits that you've
Absolutely. We are the taxpayers' watchdog. So there's 100 people who work in our office day in, day out. They're working on financial audits, investigations into potential public corruption. And we also have a program we started in my first term for efficiency promotion to make sure that taxpayer dollars are getting used efficiently. And so that's it. It's kind of like it is the home of checks and balances for state government and for local government. We are supposed to be looking after everyone else who's spending your tax dollars. We audit tax spenders, not taxpayers. So if you have a problem and you're going to get audited, it's by the Department of Revenue, but we're going to audit the Department of Revenue.
I see.
And so we're looking after government. We're looking out for public corruption, waste, fraud, and abuse of tax dollars. And
apparently there's quite a bit. There's quite a bit of it.
There is. We uncovered a record amount of misspent money in my first term, which I think is part and parcel of why in my second term they literally made it harder for us to find misspent money, which is such a depressing, that's not what's supposed to happen. I wasn't expecting a raise for our office doing all that good work, but certainly you would hope that the answer would be, boy, we should quit misspending money, as opposed to, boy, we should make it harder for that guy to find the misspent money.
So they're not giving you all the paperwork.
They literally passed a new law that makes 8 different categories of documents off limits to us, plus a 9th category that's kind of like a kitchen sink, a catch-all. And then if they deny us access to records that we should get even outside of all those categories, now we don't get to go to a judge anymore, an independent judge, to have them decide whether or not we get the documents.
So who passes this? The legislation?
The legislature and the governor signed it. And it's the law in the state of Iowa right now. And if you think it sounds crazy, let me tell you, you are correct. The American Institute of CPAs, which is the entity that writes the auditing standards for every single audit in the country, they wrote a letter to the legislature saying, hey guys, we saw what you're going to do here. Super bad idea. You should not do that. Don't do that. It
incentivizes more fraud.
Yes, exactly. It's literally imagine, so here's this list of documents that we can't look at. Imagine that from the perspective of someone who handles tax dollars related to that. It's like a menu. Here's where I can steal from, and it's harder for the auditor to find it.
What's the the thinking behind it? What's they want? How do they justify this?
Well, so they justify it by saying, we're trying to protect privacy. It's we only audit taxpayer entities, government, right?
Public.
Yeah.
It should all be public.
Right. And I think we want the spending of tax dollars to get audited.
Yeah.
Right? And so their justification for it really at the end of the day, that's why every professional organization basically weighed in against this bill. Even across the country, there was a nationwide uproar about it because their arguments just didn't hold water. We follow HIPAA. We follow FERPA, which is the privacy law for educational records. We've never had a privacy violation. Everyone in our office signs an acknowledgement every year that if you are working on an audit and you disclose something that's supposed to be confidential, it's grounds for termination. That's by law for our office. So we understand the importance of privacy. We respect it, and we actually have done some work to try to promote it.
And some of the audits, when you find out that there is fraud, am I wrong? There's no punishment. There's no prison time. Or is there now something?
I would love to see more prison time for people who steal tax dollars. I've been asking the legislature for years to make it so that large-scale theft of tax dollars is a mandatory prison sentence. And I don't mean lock them up and throw away the key.
Yeah.
I just mean not probation. Yeah, something. Something.
Yeah.
But
because they're doing it with intention to this is premeditated activity, right? It's not
They are waking up every single day deciding to steal money that they know isn't theirs, which I think is, if you can, part of a good judicial system, a good justice system is setting up a system that will deter people from doing wrong, right? That will help them decide not to do the crime in the first place.
Yeah.
So this kind of crime, white collar crime, it's premeditated. It's people who are making decisions when they are sober.
Yeah.
They are clear-headed. They are doing it week after week, month after month. It's exactly the kind of stuff that if you help them understand that they're going to get punished for it, you can deter them from doing it.
Right,
Whereas two guys in a fight at a bar, if they get drunk and they're angry with each other in a bar, they're not going to be like, gee, I don't know, maybe we shouldn't do this. I remember reading in the news last week about this guy who got in a drunken bar fight and he went to prison. They're just drunk and angry and they're going to have a fight. Yeah, right. So, but this stuff, I think if you punish it effectively, studies show that you're going to have a lot less of it.
Just recently, so you audit universities too?
Yeah.
And tell me about the recent one I saw in the news that involved somebody in the University of Iowa.
University of Iowa, yeah, sure. We had about a guy who deposited about $1 million of his into his accounts for work that was getting done by university employees on university time, on university machines. This is a thing called the machine shop, and it's at the physics department for the University of Iowa. And they make parts, and they fix machines. And so it's a machinist's shop, right? They've got a lot of different tools, a lot of different things that they use, and they also can create parts, create prototypes. And they have an online setup where if you're looking for a machinist, if you want somebody to do something for you, you can actually hire them to do it, right?
Okay.
But the guy that was running the show was actually sending those funds when he got them into his own accounts as opposed to remitting them to the university. It was about almost $1 million worth.
That's not a little bit.
No, that is a lot. That's a lot. And he had actually gotten in trouble.
So he was like consulting fees from, or just like 1099 type of, so he would send them the invoice and he would just put his account number.
Yep. And then he would deposit them into his business account as opposed to putting them into the university account.
Did he put like the University of Iowa logo on the invoice? Was he like fabricating the whole invoice? Or
he had a private company that he would sort of deposit the accounts into, or deposit the funds into. But for example, if you on this clearinghouse, if you were looking for a machinist on this internet clearinghouse and you typed in University of Iowa, his private company would actually be the one that would auto-populate. So he was very much intermingling.
This is like high tech, or like it's very advanced type of theft, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's not just Tommy taking cash out of the till.
Yeah.
At the
so
at the concession stand.
Right now? Where's that at?
He has been indicted by the Johnson County Attorney's Office, so he's facing criminal charges.
Okay.
And we'll see where it goes.
So he'll possibly face
prison time, possibly. But and that's so we don't get involved. We have no authority to indict.
Right.
I used to do that. Prior to being state auditor, I was the chief financial crimes, public corruption prosecutor in the Attorney General's office. And so when we had a filmmaking tax credit scandal, I prosecuted those cases. The largest lottery rigging scheme in American history was actually sort of headquartered out of Iowa. And I ran the investigation and the prosecution that held that guy accountable for that. And so I worked a lot with the state auditor's office because they would issue their reports and they would typically come to my desk for me to decide, okay, is this criminal? If it's criminal, what charges should I file? That kind of thing.
This is an elected position that you have. So you get elected by the public. You're kind of your favorability is pretty, it's up there, right?
We're doing good. We're number one, baby.
We're number one. And I mean, you have the credentials. So you went to Brown University,
Iowa Law School, Decorah High School, Decorah Vikings,
Goliath, Toppling Goliath.
Toppling Goliath is up there. Yeah.
We haven't been out there, but
you gotta go. You gotta go.
A spot. Is it still a good time to go?
Oh yeah, I mean it's October in Iowa. This is the best time to be on the road. I think so.
Yeah.
I try to. I do. There's two things I want to do in October and November in Iowa. travel around and see the leaves changing and sit in a tree with my bow and go bow hunting. And in an election year.
How long do you stand on the? I heard that you have to stand there for a long period of time.
Sometimes I will go out for the whole day. And so I'll be in the tree an hour before first light, maybe half, to be honest, half an hour before first light. I'm a little slow moving in the morning. And then the end of hunting light is a half hour after sunset. And some of my favorite days are days where I can take the entire day. I will pack multiple peanut butter and jelly sandwiches into my pockets.
Just sitting there and like,
yes.
Are you like up high on the tree or just low?
I prefer to be up high. Like if I can get 15 or 20 feet up, great.
Okay.
That would be better than lower than that. But I also like to hunt from the ground. And I've recently gotten into what's called saddle hunting, where you're wearing kind of like a lineman's, like an electrical lineman's saddle. So you can climb up a tree quickly and get down the tree quickly.
Okay. I see.
And so instead of having a big, heavy, clunky tree stand that you're in all day, it's much easier to move around.
You're just hanging on the tree.
You're kind of hanging on the tree, yeah. Like so, you bring
like
some climbing
koala?
sticks, yeah, like a koala.
Yeah,
you bring a couple climbing sticks. I have these little climbing ladders.
Yeah.
They're like rope ladders.
Yeah.
And I'll put those up. They're on my belt or on my waist. If I see a tree, if I see some good sign, I'm like, ooh, this is a good spot. I want to set up here. I put my ladders up the tree. I put my rope around the tree, attach that to my saddle. I'm hanging out. And I'll be up there for 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours.
Yeah.
Until I feel like I'm bored and I want to move.
So you have the credentials and the education and the experience. Why isn't there like for any job you gotta have a resume, right? Like I'm in the staffing world, I'm in the recruiting, headhunting world, and like any corporation, any employer, they're always looking at resumes, experience, skills, education. Some offices that are open to run, like they don't have that criteria. Why do you think that is? Or
I think a lot of times we forget that having an outsider's perspective can be really valuable. And I think the only job in Iowa that's an elected position that you have to have a particular qualification for, I think you've got to be an attorney to be the attorney general. I'm actually not sure of that. But sometimes, and you'll understand this, everybody understands this. Sometimes you need someone that doesn't quote unquote know everything that you know to ask the right kind of question to make you go, I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
And I think especially when what you're doing at the end of the day is you're electing someone as a member of the public to go out and help oversee the government and help the government entity do what it should be doing for the public. It might be helpful to have someone who isn't part and parcel of the people who are in that profession, right?
I see.
It makes a lot of sense to have someone who's an attorney be the attorney general. It makes a lot of sense to have somebody who is a CPA be the state auditor, but it's not required. It's not required to be an accountant. We have had lawyers, teachers, I think a pastor or two. Many people from many walks of life have been state auditor. Oftentimes before they were state auditor, they were legislator. And so they learned a little bit about, how
what
state
about
government
an age
works.
Requirement? Is that, I mean,
there isn't.
Some people look like they're.
Oh, I think we should have one in general for every elected office.
I mean, Mitch McConnell freezes.
And Nancy Pelosi too. Yeah. No, she doesn't freeze. But there's just here's my whole thing. The Iowa Supreme Court has mandatory retirement at age 72. That seems very reasonable. Yeah. It doesn't mean you can't go work at a law firm. It's not like it's not like forced retirement. It's just this job is for people within this amount of life and this part of life. We have minimum age requirements. I think it makes sense to have maximum age requirements because you're exercising a lot of discretion on behalf of the public. And I think it makes sense to just sort of have to be willing to say, look, we want the people who are doing this to be sort of in the relative middle years of life, or at least not out on the edges of it.
Yeah, but that's kind of that'll never change, right? Like, do you think that that'll ever
change?
Be something?
Change happens. Yeah, I think we can do that.
You think?
I think if you ask most ordinary people, they would be like, yeah, you should just sort of have a certain point at which it's like, nah, you thank you, we're good.
Yeah,
somebody else can have a turn. Point. We also put way too much attention or appeal or we put elected officials up on too much of a pedestal.
Okay.
Like, you guys probably know a dozen people that would do a great job as a U.S. senator or a governor or a state auditor.
Uh-huh.
But we'll probably, of those dozen, none of them will ever hold the office.
Uh-huh.
And I think if we had a system that promoted more turnover, like term limits or age limits,
right.
I would prefer both.
Uh-huh.
You would see more people getting that kind of experience. And you would also just see it, the holding of office, as becoming more of a thing that is just, you take your turn as opposed to having an entire career of it.
But also, like, public office doesn't pay so well either, does it?
Mm-mm.
So that also kind of takes some people out of the game, because, like, I gotta have a job and I'm making $80,000,
right? And
then this legislation job pays $40,000.
The legislature, I think the legislature pays. I'm not sure what it pays. All the statewide elected officials, we get $103,000 a year. That's good money.
Yeah,
that's plenty for me. But also, I could make a lot more if I was working at a law firm, right?
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of talented people out there who say, well, I'd have to take a big pay cut to do that. Uh-huh. And, I maybe can or maybe can't afford that pay cut. I can see both sides of that argument. On the one hand, you want there to be a reason for people to do it. On the other hand, you want them to be there to serve the public,
right,
not to make money.
Yeah. So it's like a balancing act.
Yeah, balancing act. Yeah.
Because sometimes people that come from wealth are the ones that are able to run, because they don't,
Oh yeah.
They don't have, so they're kind of almost groomed to be like, okay, you'll be the one that is gonna run, because we'll support you here.
Tremendous advantages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what?
And I think that's true for other things too, sure. Right? Like, it's easier to be an artist if you've got a trust fund. Almost anything you want to do.
Yeah.
If you have resources, it takes pressure off.
Yeah.
So you can focus on whatever it is, right? Yeah. One of the biggest indicators of whether or not a person completes college is their family's income level before they start.
Right.
And which, if you're in college and you're from a family that's able to relieve financial pressures so you can focus on your studies, that's easier. If you're from a working class family and your parents are struggling for money, or you're struggling for money because you're trying to make ends meet while you're in college, that is harder. And the time and the attention that takes away from your studies makes it more likely that you're not able to complete it.
Do you think that should be looked at as a whole, of how?
Yeah, I think
it makes it more accessible. Going back to the running for public office, makes it more accessible if somebody that's passionate about, social issues and all the things that a society takes to run.
Yeah.
But then they're not, like, I gotta make a living too.
And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, having the outsider's perspective. Mm-hmm. So often these places are full of people who are not working class, right? Look, I'm a lawyer. I grew up in a small town, but my dad was a doctor. I wouldn't claim that we were working class. We were in a small town, and my best friends, who are still my best friends today, came from fairly typical working class families. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that I love about Iowa public schools, is I think that is one of the experiences you can have in life that is a broadening experience, right? If you're going to school in public schools, your friends and your classmates come from every single walk of life.
Yeah.
Whereas most of the time, what you do after that is a narrowing experience. Mm-hmm. If you go and do an apprenticeship to become an electrician, you're hanging out with other electricians, mm-hmm. right? If you go to college, you're hanging out with people who go to college for the most part.
Right.
You go to law school, then all of a sudden you're hanging out with lawyers, and then you're working with lawyers at a law firm. That fundamental understanding that I think you get in public school is really important, because it helps you understand that people can be different. They can have different levels of income. They can have different passions, different approaches to life, different sense of style, right? Different sense of propriety or values, but still at the end of the day are mostly pretty good people who have a pretty good sense of what's good and what's bad in their life and a pretty good sense of what they'd like to see happen.
Yeah. So it's fair to say that the education system could improve, but it's a good, like our kids, they're getting a lot of social skills from it, right? Like they go and they want to go to school. They don't want to be homeschooled. We've offered and they're like, no.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Like, we can homeschool you, and they're like, no, thanks. Like, they like that, to socialize, and they understand their privileges and the struggles that other kids have. So you're right. Like it does give you a perspective of like society overall.
And one of our sons came home and was talking about one of his classmates that falls asleep in class every day. And so we because he brought that up, we had a conversation about it at the dinner table one night.
Yeah.
And we came up with, we sort of did a little brainstorm. How many different reasons might there be that this little boy might fall asleep? It might be because, his parents work 2 shifts. And so when he goes home, he has to actually, maybe he's cooking dinner for his little siblings. Maybe he's putting them to bed.
Right.
And so maybe he doesn't get to sleep as much as he would otherwise because his family's working too hard.
He's not immediately lazy.
Right.
Like
that's right.
Yeah.
We should, and I think that's a good lesson in life, is try to think of when you see somebody doing something that you could decide automatically is in some way wrong or bad, just give them a little bit of grace.
Right.
And maybe you're tired because you got too much stuff to do at home.
Yeah.
Maybe he lives in a really noisy apartment building.
Right.
Where it's hard to sleep at night because there's so much noise.
Yeah. You just never know what somebody's going through. We literally had that same talk yesterday with the twins. Like, you just don't know.
Yeah.
So be kind.
Yeah.
But let's do a 180
All right.
on so the budget. Are you aware of the Iowa budget?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So what's the surplus of Iowa?
If you count all the surplus accounts, we have about $6 billion sitting in bank accounts right now. $6 billion with a B.
At the availability to the governor.
Yeah, the legislature could be investing that money.
Yeah.
In things that we don't have in Iowa right now.
Is Iowa one of the most taxed states? I mean, we pay taxes.
We pay taxes. Let me say this about that. When I dig in to any different entities' scoring on taxes or who's responsible or those kinds of things, it typically looks more like they're just pushing some particular agenda than really trying to actually assess the answer to that. And so I would hesitate from making just really broad categorical statements. We just moved to a 4% flat tax. That is largely a tax cut for Iowans, the most wealthy Iowans.
4% tax
for state level income tax.
Okay. And where was it?
It ranged from not paying any to I want to say 10%, might have been 8%.
Okay.
But this is the legislature's job to consider and pass these questions, and so I get involved if I get asked to get involved by the legislature. And other than that, I'm trying to remember the Serenity Prayer. Focusing my energies on the things I can actually change or do something about. But the other flip. So on the one hand, they're saying, "Oh, we did this big tax cut," but that the changes that the state government has made is also resulting in an increase in property taxes because they have over the last decade removed a lot of state support from local entities.
Yeah.
And so you might see, well, let me put it this way. You might see savings because you're paying less in your income tax, but your property tax is probably a lot higher because it's gone up as a result. And so this is always my question. You want to propose a tax cut? Cool. What's the other half of the equation? Because this has to balance.
Yeah.
Iowa, we're supposed to have a 99% balanced budget rule, right? And so if you're going to cut taxes, cool. What else are you going to do? Are you cutting spending? Are we going to invest less in our schools? Are we going to invest less in our roads? Or are you finding some other source of revenue so that we don't have to make cuts to our state patrol, for example? So I always look at this stuff and I'm like, well, what's the other half?
So $6 billion. So it's fair to say that Iowa is in good shape.
I think that's, well, let me, again, broad statements.
Yeah.
Do we have a lot of money sitting in the bank? Yeah.
Yeah.
But let me ask you something. If you were sitting at your house and you had a whole ton of money sitting in the bank, but you had a leaky roof, would you say that you're in good shape?
No, but I would fix the roof, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's where the broad statement stuff is always just like, look, I want to make a fair assessment. I want to talk about pros and cons, ups and downs. And so to me, when you look at that, it's like, well, okay, I just had a woman approach me yesterday in Scott County talking about nursing homes, and a loved one of hers, I don't recall specifically, but a loved one of hers is doing this work in nursing homes and has been a state inspector in the past, but they gutted the number of folks that were doing inspections of nursing homes. And so that's a place where we decided not to invest. And you read the news, you've seen the stories about people being found in a pool of their own blood in a nursing home, or found with bed sores, or they leave the nursing home in the wintertime and nobody finds them and they've frozen to death. And so we have to ask ourselves, okay, we have a lot of money in the bank. Money in the bank is a good thing, but are there investments that we should be making to put ourselves in better shape, right? The future of our state, education. Where Iowa is in 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 100 years is depending in part on, are we doing a good job of educating our children right now? And so we can have a ton of money in the bank,
right?
But if we could be investing that money in our kids right now, then 20 years from now, oh boy, things are great around here.
Yeah.
Why? Well, because we made a good investment. So I always think you have to consider the balance.
Right. So when I meant good shape, the follow-up was like, so there's money to invest in. There's money to put into things.
And the folks in charge, they want to continue to cut taxes. That's one thing to do with it, right? Whether or not that's the right thing is a different conversation.
This might be... well, I'm a high school dropout, so like I can ask these questions. I
didn't know that about you.
Yeah, I got my GED when I was 25.
All right.
Yeah. So I'm living the American dream.
Amen.
Legit, the epitome of the American dream. So, how does Texas then? Like, how do they? There's no state taxes over there. How does they? So different states like Texas, Florida, right? If you have other things that are pulling people in, you can shift your taxes in that direction. So for example, Florida, no income tax. But you know what Florida has that Iowa doesn't have? A crap ton of people come in there every single year for vacation. So their sales tax, their hotel tax, they might have a restaurant tax, right? Sure.
But they are able to shift a lot of their tax burden onto tourists.
I see.
So it's great if you live in Florida because your income tax is low and all the people that are coming in to visit, they're all covering a lot of that burden.
Yeah.
We do not have that here in Iowa. We don't have beaches. We don't have an ocean.
No.
We don't have mountains. I personally think that people should come and visit here more often.
Yes.
But, I think we could increase our tourism. We are still not going to have beaches or oceans or mountains. Right. And so we have to, I think about that. Right. One of the things I'll say is, I don't think this is right. We on the one hand, we are certainly competing with other states for people's vacation, for people's investment, for their business, whether or not their business is going to come here.
Yes.
But we should be making decisions based on what's going to work for Iowa and not just on what other people in a particular political party are doing. This thing that sticks in my head is Governor Reynolds a couple years ago said, the Republican governors are competing with each other. And so if somebody put their income tax at 0, then I want to do that because I'm a Republican governor too. And my reaction to that is like, aren't you the Iowa governor?
Right.
You're the governor for the whole state of Iowa.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that are different between Florida and Iowa that might make things that work for Florida not work for Iowa. And that to me is just one example of them.
Yeah. So tourism, because I was on a conference call, not like a conference about employment or the state of employment and the workforce. Tourism is important, I think. If you fix like all the other stuff, right, like the homelessness issue, it'll continue to grow unless there's a permanent solution, because people are still moving into the state, right? Like, or putting more money into the educational system should also be. It sounds like there's more gutting than putting in, right?
Oh yeah, I mean they just passed a vouchers program, so now your tax dollars are supporting 2 different school systems, public and private, and there's no accountability for how the money gets spent in the vouchers program. Private schools can do literally anything on God's green earth with your tax dollars, and it's legal with one exception. They're not allowed to pay rebates to parents. But if they want to buy booze with your tax dollars, they can do that, and I don't know how we'll find out because we can't audit them.
Right.
If they want to send their superintendents and their principals to Florida for a strategic retreat over their New Year's break, they can do that with your tax dollars, and I don't know how we'll find out about it. And so to me, like, this is like, I just don't know why we're doing this. Why would we not want oversight of where our tax dollars are going? But again, that's consistent with what we were talking about when we started.
Yeah.
Just this pattern in Iowa of reducing checks and balances and increasing opportunities for corruption with your tax dollars.
This is where sometimes people say some people vote against their own interest, right? Because a lot of people are like, this is my tax dollars, these are my tax dollars. And you're just saying that this voucher system allows people to kind of use the money.
Private schools.
Right.
Use the money however they want. No rules.
Want.
If they don't want to spend it on education, literally they don't have to. You could be a for-profit private school in Iowa and not have to put the money. You could just say, everything we get from the state goes in my pocket as the for-profit owner of this for-profit school. And you could do that. That would be legal for a private school in the state of Iowa. And again, I don't know how we would find out. But I want to say this, because I don't like the framing. I have never liked the idea of assuming that people are ignorant. And this is a thing that you hear that phrase commonly, right? Oh, you're voting against your own self-interest. But what frustrates me about that is it's always aimed at working class people who are voting for Republicans. Why don't we aim that at rich people who vote for Democrats?
Yeah.
Right? Oh, should we just assume that they're so much smarter because they're Democrats? No, of course not. I assume that everybody makes a decision based on their own value priorities. And their value priorities may be the same as mine, or they might be different.
Yeah.
But so, the classic example is this book, What's the Matter with Kansas? And the author was talking about why people in Kansas continued to vote for Republicans who had economic policies favoring the rich. But a big piece of the answer was a lot of them were like, well, 2 cells dividing into 4 cells is the same moral value as my 8-year-old son Axel. And so they wanted to vote for Republicans because they didn't want any right to abortion. Why is that? I might disagree with them, but I'm not going to condescend to say that they have the wrong priorities, right? You have people who are wealthy folks who support higher taxes on wealthy folks. I don't think anyone should say, oh, you're voting against your economic self-interest, whether you are, no matter how you vote, and no matter what your bank account says, you're making a decision based on what you think is right.
So you kind of say, I'll talk about it next year but let's. So you're saying that this voucher system is not something that you would, that you would rather put more money into the public school system.
Well, I want accountability for tax dollars, and we are literally pouring over 3 years an expected $1 billion into private schools with one rule for how they can spend it. No rebates, right? Anything else they want to do, they can do. That's it. That's crazy.
That is.
I mean, I just don't think that that's responsible. Yeah. And so for me, like, look, that's the bottom line. We should at the very least make sure that we know how money is getting spent so that our dollars that we're trying to invest in education actually get spent on education, not on trips to Florida.
I know we gotta go. So one more question. Give me a couple more minutes. So what made you run and what made you become a public servant?
Yeah.
And is there a figure that inspires you that you follow?
I'll give you 2 short answers.
Sure.
I'm meeting my buddy for lunch, and so I'm not going to keep him waiting too long. Number one, I think the biggest single piece that makes me interested in doing public service is my faith.
Okay.
I think it's deeply important to who I am. It motivates so much of what I do every day. And if I can center my life on trying to serve other people, then I think I'm doing what I'm called to do. And I'm going to tell you about a moment for the second part. And I go back to this moment where John McCain was running for president against Barack Obama. And at a town hall on television, a woman got up and said some stuff about Obama that just wasn't accurate. And he could have let it fly. He could have just, yeah, that's right. He could have engaged in it.
Right.
He could have reinforced it. But he said, no, ma'am, that's not true. And here's the truth about my opponent. And we disagree on a lot, but those things about my opponent that you repeated, they're not true. And I love that kind of leadership.
Yeah.
Because the truth of the matter is, right? Like elected officials, we were talking about this, they get paid. These are full-time jobs. If you're out in D.C. and you're in Congress, I'm pretty sure your salary is $170,000 a year. We are sending you because we know a lot and we have strong values and beliefs about what should happen, but you're doing this all day, every day, and you know the details. You know the ins and the outs. And so if somebody says something that you just know because you're in it all day isn't true, then you should be saying, hey, I'm in it every day, and I know that's not true, right? One of the biggest frustrations for me about this is people who run down American democracy, right? Oh, I don't know if our elections are very reliable. This is America.
Yeah,
we're good at democracy. I'm a patriotic American. I am proud of that. And so to me, it's one thing if a person on the street, just your average person, has seen some stuff that makes them concerned.
Right.
I can appreciate that. But when people who are getting paid full time in tax dollars to know what's going on don't push back, that to me is cowardice. And so I loved John McCain being willing to say, hey, hold on a second. Here's what the truth is.
Right.
And that might upset you with me, but I'm willing to have you be upset with me for correcting you in public in order for me to help do my job of spreading the truth about what I know.
And informing and not continue to misinform or feed into it.
Yes, exactly.
And ultimately, that's kind of your role, right? To be transparent, to get people to accountable for their actions. So, Rob Sand, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
Tell your friend I'm sorry that you're running late for lunch.
All right.
But I greatly appreciate it. I look forward to see your career continue to rise.
Well, and I look forward to seeing you guys around town. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
See everybody next time.